Hello again to this video. This is another video for the Pixel Dailies theme. What you just saw at the beginning there was a few thumbnails that I did for this image before I started. Now in the stream what I did was I redrew some of the elements of the layout, and I was showing there my color key, which is basically my first approach on coloring the scene. Now I'm doing a second one, and in this case I'm not even going to be doing it in Pixel because I'm really just looking for the colors and I'm rebuilding some of the perspective that didn't look so good. So this is basically a way for me to get an idea of what I want from the final image. This doesn't take that long. I think this took about like 5 minutes or something. And you can see that with a soft brush. I mean, this is clearly not a pixel art image, but it gives me a really nice idea of the depth of the scene and the colors that I want to use. So it's nice if you get a chance to do something like this, and if you can do something like this, you know, take a chance on actually doing it. Now I have to rebuild the scene because originally the perspective that I used was a bit off. It was sketchy, like literally sketchy. It was done with no preparation, with no construction lines. So it's basically eyeballing the perspective into the drawing. And what I do now is I have a chance to actually rebuild it using the free transform tool in Photoshop in perspective mode or in distort mode. It allows me to get this sort of perspective correct, let's say, shapes. And so I start building the different surfaces of the environment, the different walls, and that's a way for me to build the scene in the correct shape. Now this is basically the skeleton of the scene in terms of the surface that exists and what I want to do with them. And I'm gradually building the scene from shapes, then adding lines in the elements that I have breaks, like for example the bricks here on the wall. I start to add those in, and I'm doing this mostly because I was streaming this, and that way I was sort of explaining my approach, what my approach was going to be for the whole image. I just say that little bit there and instantly try and find something else to do, because just doing that is a bit uninteresting. And in this case, this is me dealing with a big surface like that. Now the ceiling here is going to be made up with wood planks. So I'm creating those beams that support the ceiling, and I know that the planks are going to have to go across in a different direction. If I actually made the beams go in the opposite direction, they would cover up most of the ceiling because the beams have thickness and they sort of would occlude the ceiling. So what I'm doing now is just adding a few more shades and some cast shadows, figuring out what parts of the ceiling still get the light from the chandelier that's going to be hanging. And by adding these lines here, I'm able to do two things. One is to break the monotony of those circles, of those ellipses of shading. And the other one is I add texture. As I add texture, the scene starts to look like solid, made up of solid objects and not just flat shapes. You get a little bit of texture, you get a little bit of light bouncing off, so it's a way to improve the quality of your scene by just responding to natural things. Like, does wood have cracks going in this direction? Then I'll paint them in. So it's not really complicated to do. It's more about taking a step back and understanding the scene. Now this wall here is a daubed wall, so the pillars and the columns made of wood are actually almost flush on the surface. So they only have this really tiny highlight. And the way I'm doing shading the daub is I'm adding those bright areas there. And that's just because my light source is a finite light source. It's not like the sun, which is really far away. It's a chandelier that is actually quite close. And being a point light, you get darker as you step away from it. So that's why the wall kind of has that gradient as you step away. Now these vertical lines here on the bar are basically for me to create the sense that there's a structure on it. This is me creating the shape for the chandelier, which is basically cutting out a ring shape and then duplicating it vertically so that I can get a donut, sort of a cylinder or a tube out of it. And now I'm adding the candles that are actually going to light up. And by adding that there, I kind of justify the light that I painted on the ceiling, because so far there was nothing there to say, you know, there's a light source here to shade this. So this is just a way to actually contextualize the light that you see there on the ceiling. Now for this part, I actually made the lines of the separation between the bricks in a different layer, and then I shaded them onto a new layer. I eventually merged the two together so that I can more easily paint over certain elements. Like if you're using too many layers, you're always going to run into the annoyance of wanting to draw something and gradually be drawing behind the layer. Now this here is the window. The window is really just going to act as a way for me to include a different light source, which is the light from the moon. And really just for visual interest, I always think that it's cool to have those volumetric lights or those God rays coming in an image. It just gives things a little bit more depth. Adding a bit more shading there on the side as I basically go around the whole image trying to find places that need to be shaded and need to have texture. In this case, I want to do the stairs, so what I do is I duplicate the image onto a new file to create the shape for the stairs so that I don't have to draw over this image, because it was fiddly with the layers. I didn't want to have to be dealing with a lot of layers. I try to match them with a perspective, which is a little hard because there's not enough length on the objects for me to get a good idea of perspective. The next step will be adding table and the bartender and also the guy, but I think I add the guy after the stream. And this uses the same technique. I basically put in the planks of wood, and I'm assuming here that the wood is a little more polished because it's been wiped clean. Most time people rub their arms on it. So it's going to have a little bit more reflection than just like the ground, for example. And this candle here also does the same. It justifies the light on the table, not just the light from the chandelier. The bartender, I put in this, or the innkeeper or tavern owner, I don't know. Let's call it bartender. It does look like a modern bartender because it kind of looks like it has a vest and a little bow tie. But so in the case of the light, this is basically what I do. And the image finished looks like this. So you can see I added those barrels back there. I added the other guy at the front, and I added a few more details here and there that I just felt would improve the image. So hope you guys enjoy this, and I'll see you guys.